Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Pål Krogdahl and Ville Sointu, this is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello and welcome back to Fintech Daydreaming. Dear listeners, this is the finale of season 3, which has been a pretty much of a roller coaster of a season. And while we are sitting here in the summer of the Finnish summer, I have to realize that when we actually finished season 2, I was sitting with Paul in our studio in his house. With beers in our hands, Christmas beers, no less. Right now, I have sparkling water with me, which is not as good, but I guess in this heat, it's actually much nicer than a kind of a Christmassy beer. But that being said, again, my name is Ville Sointu. I will be your host for this season finale episode of Fintech Daydreaming. And of course, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Pål Krogdahl. So, Paul, are you enjoying the summer heat?
Are we live? Are we recording?
I guess we are.
Hang on. Hi guys. Welcome. How's life, Villa?
Life is good. Life is really good. A bit hot.
No, it is hot. You're absolutely right. It is. And it's shocking to a certain degree how time really does fly when you're having fun, right? We coming to the end of yet another season this fast. Actually, the whole first half of the year, I think, has gone tremendously fast. Me with getting a new job at IBM and everything else. It's been exciting. And wow, what a host of fantastic guests we've had on the show since the start of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess when we started season 3, we couldn't even imagine all the kind of nice guests and really famous guests that we've had for this season. So it's been definitely a ride for this season. And let's see, what we're going to do today is we're going to sum up the season. We're going to talk about a little bit about the highlights of this season. And then we have some audience questions that we will cover. And mostly we just want to give you a bit of a background or a behind the scenes perspective into recording our podcast, which has been turning out to be much more interesting than we ever thought that it will be. And of course, when we're talking about the podcast and it's kind of picking up, people kind of finding it more and more, we've also learned that one of the most kind of liked segments of our podcast is the joke that we do in the beginning. So we strive to find the best or the worst, depending on your point of view, a joke about fintech and give it to you, dear listeners, every 2 weeks when we are live recording. And of course, while this is a special episode with just me and Paul, we still, of course, have a joke, don't we, Paul?
We do. And I think it's always fun to have jokes, particularly when there's guests or listeners that send them in. And sometimes we have to be honest, Villa, right? We end up having to Google for them ourselves. But this time, quite luckily, we've had a listener sending in a joke. Whether it's good or bad, we'll let that up to the listeners to decide, or even you, right? But so this is a joke that's not from me, it's from a listener, but it goes, what does my partner and my bank have in common?
I feel this is going to be a good one, but yeah, I don't know. Please tell me.
Unfortunately, neither of them will give me any credit.
Okay, that was actually pretty good. Pretty good.
I actually think, I have to be honest and say, when it comes to all of the jokes we've had, for personal reasons, the best one we've had is the one that my daughter found for us when she did some Googling. And I can't quite remember how did it go. It was, why did the duck go to the bank?
I don't remember this one.
He needed a new bill.
Oh, indeed. That's authentic.
It is authentic. What has been your favorite joke, Villa?
Well, I have to say that well, we've had some really good real listener jokes, and of course, some of them we have Googled. But I have to say that I did some thinking on one of the jokes this season myself, because we didn't have a listener joke, and I felt that kind of Googling was a little bit tired. So I kind of came up with one by myself, which was the one about Nintendo and Ethereum. So even though it was maybe a little bit selfish to say that it was my favorite joke, I just kind of enjoyed the process of thinking of how to actually construct a joke about non-fungi tokens, Nintendo and Ethereum. So yeah, just maybe a little bit of a nerd in me, which was kind of my favorite moment. Maybe not the joke itself, but the process of kind of figuring it out. That was a lot of fun to do. And just to recap, the joke was that did you hear that the Nintendo's blockchain development team ran into internal issues while planning for the next Super Mario game? And then, of course, the reason why they ran into the problems was that Super Mario heard that they're going to use non-fungi tokens for the game, and that's why he got upset.
So I'm wondering, are you planning on creating an NFT for that joke and monetizing on it?
Yeah, which reminds me, actually, we had a good discussion with Dave Birch on NFTs.
We did, yeah.
He gave a couple of good analogies on what NFTs are like. And well, my opinions on NFT are well known as well. I don't actually understand how they connect to copyright law in any kind of a meaningful way. And that's why they have a lot of legal issues and misunderstandings in general. But that being said, I am a proud owner of, I think, 3 CryptoKitties, which are like 4 or 5 years old. And yeah, I haven't really even tested their market value, but I think it's an interesting element to use as this kind of a unique set of kind of characters or hash that then you're able to use across different platforms if the platforms accept it. Yeah. And that kind of acceptance of these tokens and understanding on how you can actually build other features on top of these existing features of the NFTs. I think this world is interesting. To me, it's less interesting to talk about, creating tokens about art or things like this, because just like I said, it's not really clear what are your ownership rights for this, for actually having that NFT in your Ethereum wallet, for example. But
I think was it I saw in the news this morning, Jay-Z is suing now someone for copyright infringements on NFTs associated with his first album or something. Yeah, I need to. So I mean, it's interesting development. I think we're always going to see something good come out the back of all of these things, but sometimes you have to have the ups and downs and some of the idiocy that goes with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the gap on how actually this system is, or this ecosystem is constructed, and the way people perceive it or how it's marketed. Yeah. Because the NFTs are marketed pretty much to people who are not, familiar with blockchains and cryptocurrencies in general, as kind of this digital proof of authenticity that you can have as a real thing that you can trade and has value. Now, there is no guarantees that actually that NFT is even created by the owner of that content. So, which is again the Jay's point on the JC thing. We also seen a lot of online art being NFT'd without the permission of the actual author or the artists themselves. And again, this all goes back to, you can have 10 NFTs on the same piece of art, and there's no way for you to check, whether your NFT is the only one in existence. The only way you do that is that you actually link it into contracts or some kind of a digital identity, which is kind of strongly verified digital identity of the artist, him or herself. And there is no such identity scheme in existence in the kind of permissionless blockchain world for obvious reasons. But yeah, I guess we are kind of going into some of the topics that we want to cover actually in season 4. Because I do feel that identity is going to be a big topic for season 4. But more on that later. Now, we have to talk about, of course, season 3. So do you remember, Paul, when we kind of had our Christmas beers after season 2, and we started thinking about how we want to kind of approach season 3, and what do we want to change and what do we want to keep. Do you remember kind of what was your thinking back then on, and how it kind of turned out in the end?
Yeah, my thinking was, continuing on the track that we were on, trying to, I have to be honest, we sort of set ourselves that challenge of seeing who we could get on as guests, how far up could we climb, who would be good guests on the show. And like I said at the beginning, I am still shocked at some of the guests, that positively shocked, right, at some of the guests that we've had on the show for this season. And I think we've set the bar quite high. We'll have to see what we can do for season 4 to continue on that. I had hoped that we were going to do more episodes actually being physically together here in the studio, rather than just me sitting here. I think that would have added a nice dynamic to it, but we've managed to make things work, even though we've had lots of problems with technology, etc., along the journey this season. Yeah, I think the funniest one was probably when we had the session, or the episode with Brett King, right, where halfway through our subscription to Zoom was about to expire because we were running on the free subscription of Zoom, and it just came up and said, your session will end in 5 minutes. So whilst we're having the whole discussion going on, I was running around trying to find my credit card and subscribing to Zoom, etc., whilst maintaining a good posture for our whole recording. I think that was one I'm never really going to forget. Right, yeah, with Brett King amongst everybody else, and suddenly I've got this panic of shit, our session is about to expire. Yeah. So, but it worked out in the end, right? And now we've got a date for subscription.
Yeah, and you were the host.
Yes.
And again, Brett was our first kind of, let's say, kind of almost tier 1 level fintech guest. So we've of course had some really kind of famous and fantastic guests before, but Brett kind of being a very public figure in this space, it was a very kind of, a lot of excitement in the air, let's put it that way, on that episode. But coming back a little bit on kind of remembering how it felt like after season 2 and what we wanted to get out of season 3, is that we kind of created this, let's create like a bucket list of guests, who actually would be really great to have, and kind of anybody basically. So of course the obvious, like Elon Musk and people like that aside, I think we listed people like Brett King, Jim Maroos, Dave Birch. And I honestly did not believe when we started season 3 that we would actually get all of these guests, practically all of them. Some of them we are now going to try to get for season 4, which we didn't get this season. Yeah. But now that we have kind of established this kind of high level guest lineup, I think it's going to be much more interesting moving forward to get even more of these kind of really interesting and well-spoken guests. And again.
Absolutely. I'm wondering who our listeners would like us to talk to. I mean, I'm wondering if our listeners have got some famous people or smart industry thought leaders that they would like us to have onto the show. I mean, it's great that you and I have ideas of who we want to talk to, but I'm wondering if our listeners out there have got some people that they'd really like to hear us having a discussion with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we do, of course, try to encourage people every time when we record to reach us out and ask who they would like to have as guests. But that's a very good point. I think your dear audience, you are the ones who are listening to this. So it's, of course, up to you to decide who do you want to have as guests. And we, of course, are still welcoming all the requests that you might have. And as you have learned, we can get pretty much anybody, maybe not Barack Obama, but, pretty much anyone else that we can at least try to get, or at least make a funny story if we fail to get them on the show.
Yeah.
But
who's been your favorite guest?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. There's been so many, and I think your answer is going to be the same to this question. We had so many good guests this season and the seasons before as well. But it's been fun, kind of interesting to find the theme of season 3 is that we have kind of this higher profile, at least from a social media standpoint, people with more followers on social media. on season 3. And I mean, the obvious thing is Brett King, just because he was the first kind of a really high level guest that we had. Of course, that's always going to be a memorable guest. But then personally for me, of course, is Dave Birch. So I think when we recorded the episode, I said that in the beginning of the entire show, if there was one guest that I wanted to be kind of have on our show, would have been Dave Birch. Again, it's somebody that I've been following for most of my career. When I first saw him speaking, I think it was 2010, 11 years ago. I thought that, wow, this is a funny person, and seems to be thinking a lot alike, like I am thinking, talking already back then about becoming cashless, talking about contactless transactions, all the kind of new things back then that are kind of completely mainstream today. And today, of course, he's thinking about the kind of identity being the new money, and digital identity being the center of everything. And now just looking at how the world is moving forward, I think this is going to become front and center, the kind of digital identity and how to make it interoperable across different kind of national schemes. And
setting us up for next season now with interesting topics again, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So those are my two off the top of my head. Again, there's been so many great guests this season. It's hard to pick any two, but those are the kind of two people who stand out from the lineup this season.
I've got a bit for me. I mean, obviously, yes, you're right. Brett King, Jim Rose, but both of them are high up on the list for me. But because they're famous and they're recognized in the industry, they're actually even recognized outside of the industry. I mean, fantastic authors, great books, etc. But if I'm sort of going to look personally from my perspective, I think the two that are quite high up there for me, one is obviously Mark Stevenson. Embarrassingly enough, when I mispronounced his name out of, can we say a bit of stress at the beginning there, but yeah. I really feel empowered by his perspective, his future vision on sustainability and the way that we are going as the human race. The other one that I also thought was a fantastic episode was with Philippe Haglund, specifically because, I mean, I've got children. I'm trying to teach them about money, financial literacy. It's one of the areas that I'm very focused on, is the fact that we are seeing a drastic drop in financial literacy in the younger generation. And as we're moving more and more to digital payments, central bank digital currencies, the confusion of cryptocurrencies, etc., and particularly when you know that people are living longer, they need to really think about how they're going to have their financial wealth and stability when they get old. Financial literacy is becoming a real critical element. And I think that episode and the discussion we had with Philippe was fantastically good. It opened my mind. He had some really great perspectives. And he actually empowered me to focus more on the whole area of financial literacy. I actually think as a podcast, as Fintech Daydreaming, we should look forward at maybe seeing how we can interact with the education system here in Finland and help with financial literacy and help with educating the younger generation in understanding money management. Maybe a little bit of a big sort of target for us, but there maybe is something there for us to do going forwards, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we in my place of work, which of course is a bank, we of course have a lot of cooperation with universities, and I think it would be an interesting kind of spin on that whole conversation to maybe take a kind of thing like a podcast and maybe do some interviews or episodes even live as soon as we get over this pandemic situation. To talk about financial literacy and kind of try to kind of engage in that conversation in a more meaningful way. And that actually, on a kind of related topic, reminds me that some of the kind of discussions that we've had about kind of what topics we want to cover and what kind of guests we want to have on the show has been linked to financial inclusion from a global standpoint. So, I mean, is that an interesting topic for our listeners, for example, to talk about emerging markets? Are systems that are being built in Africa or South America or other emerging economies? I mean, there's a lot of interesting things happening there, but sometimes we feel that maybe it's not something that touches the day-to-day lives of our listeners. But again, let us know. Is kind of financial inclusion in the emerging markets, for example, an interesting topic that you would like us to cover? We definitely have some interesting thoughts about interesting guests in that space as well. And of course, we would definitely like to engage in those conversations. It's a very, very important topic.
Actually, talking about guests and topics, an interesting little bit of statistics for you here, Ville. I mean, with all of the famous people we've had on the show, etc. The interesting one is when you look at, we're now doing this wall of fame every month from our YouTube videos. Second on that is actually Boris, right? The episode we did with Boris, it's had the second of the top amount of views on YouTube.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it was a real techie one. It was a deep dive into data models and databases. It wasn't a guest which was a industry thought leader. I mean, I'm not saying that Boris isn't a recognized thought leader, but, pitched against Jim Rose and Brett King, etc. He's a slightly different profile. So it's interesting from our listeners' perspective that Boris ranks that high up. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really kind of something that surprised me as well, because again, when it was a really kind of a nerdy deep dive almost with Boris, and we kind of geeked out a little bit. And I guess both of us were a little bit worried after that episode, is that, are we going to lose the audience completely because we're just kind of geeked out on tech data infrastructure and things like this. But turns out there's an audience for these types of episodes as well. Maybe we need to kind of give a warning on the show description if we're going to go deep, and then people who are actually interested in that stuff will be able to find them as well. But yeah, that was an interesting lesson learned as well. I think you can go deep if you want to with the right guests, and Boris was a fantastic guest, I have to say. Yes. It was really kind of fun to kind of go a little bit deeper on those topics for sure.
And he was very passionate. I mean, we've had a couple of guests in the past that have got that sort of passion and get really excited as they're talking faster and faster and getting really excited, forgetting that they're actually on a podcast almost, right?
Yeah. Then we run like almost close to an hour on the episode recording time, and it kind of gets a little bit. You have to stop almost like in the middle of a sentence in the end, because time again flies when you're having a lot of fun. But Paul, you gave us the one of your favorite blunders, I guess, from this season, which was you're mispronouncing the name of one of your favorite guests. But I think my favorite one has to be the live episode that we did, because I guess whenever you have a live episode, of course you have to have some kind of a mistake in it, because otherwise it's not going to be a fully live episode. Yeah. So it was a little bit of a fun moment of panic when we introduced our guest Paolo Cironi for that episode, and then when we said hello Paolo, and then he was gone.
Yes. And then you threw me in front of the lions, right? And said, so Paul, what's your point of view here?
Yeah, exactly. So I really put you in the spot there. But when we got some feedback later on about that, and people felt that we managed the situation quite well. And luckily we got Paolo back, even though it was without video, but it was better because he also had some really, really interesting things to say. Another thing that we got feedback from that episode is that they would have liked to hear more from Paolo, so maybe we need to bring him back later on for a kind of a longer discussion as well. People really appreciated his points of view.
Oh, I think we do, and that was quite a short episode because we were constrained by the schedule that the day had. And so I think we need to have Paolo come back for a longer, more focused episode. I also think we need to get Brett King back because he's just published his new book, right? It would be fantastic to have him come back and talk about his new book.
Yeah, let's see if he comes on. I think he seemed to have had a good time talking to us, and at least we didn't hear any complaints. Quite the contrary, he was very positive about the discussion. So maybe we get him back talk about his new book.
But actually, another plunder that we had on that same episode, the live episode with Paolo Saroni, I had set up my MacBook for the recording, and I hadn't plugged in my power. Right, so halfway through that episode, suddenly my MacBook was saying it was going to go into sleep mode within 5 minutes. So we're in the middle of recording the episode and being all professional. I was running around the house trying to find my power adapter for the MacBook to try and stop, because I mean, we're recording on my machine, right? So it was
yeah. And I was hosting that episode, and I was kind of talking there, and suddenly I just see you leave from the camera, and I was like, well, where are you going? And anyway, it was a fun episode too. Not fun at the time, I can tell you. A bit of a kind of panicky situations there, but I think it was afterwards. It was fun to have these incidents while we record.
But I think that actually also sort of proves to everyone else. I mean, I can remember before we started the podcasts, one of the reasons why I was delaying on the idea was that I thought we needed to be professional. I mean, we are professional, but we needed to be very professional, have all the right equipment, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is, you don't need very much, and you don't need to prepare very much. And it is actually quite easy to get up and going. I would really recommend to anyone who's ever thought about doing a podcast, just do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think we learn as we go. I think if you listen to our first episodes and compare to the ones that we've done in this season, you can kind of hear the difference and see the difference if you're watching on YouTube. And yeah, you kind of get along, and it feels like people appreciate authenticity, and the authenticity shows when you're actually showing your mistakes. You're showing that you're not doing a perfect studio level recording every time, and I think it kind of makes it more interesting for the audience as well.
Yeah.
Talking about the audience, by the way, I think we got some audience questions. You posted on LinkedIn asking for questions for us to answer on this episode. And you want to kind of walk through some of the questions?
Oh, you're throwing them at me. I need to find them again here now.
Yeah, putting you on the spot again.
Yes, putting me on the spot again. Yeah. So, I mean, what has been your favorite guest to date was one of the questions, right? Which doesn't just cover this season, it covers everything right from the beginning. Have you got, what's been your favorite guest to date, Ville?
That's a tough question.
It is. I mean, apart from me, obviously.
Of course. I mean, yeah. Paul, you're my favorite guest, of course.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I think the first one is always the first one, right? So yes. we had David Grundy from Danske Bank, also a good friend of mine. Also part of the reason why he was able to come to the podcast is because he's a good friend of mine, and yours as well now, of course, Paul. So yeah, I think that kind of feeling of starting a new podcast, first episode, and then kind of getting it out there, and then kind of being a little bit afraid what people will say, and then just continuing on after at least not kind of significantly bad feedback from the first episode. I think maybe that's because it was the first one as the most memorable one. Maybe that's my favorite for now.
Possibly. I mean, I've got to admit, we did, I think for season one, quite a lot of the first guests we had were from our circle of friends and contacts, right? Which is always a safe thing to do, to start with people you know. You can almost guarantee they'll say yes, and it's a circle of security almost. Unlike when you step into the big league and start having Brett King and Jim Rose and Dave Birch, etc., coming onto the show. I don't think I can actually point at one specific person as being my favorite guest. I think every single guest we've had has brought something new and relevant and exciting to me. I learn something new in every single episode that we host. I get more insight, and I actually get a feeling of gratitude that these guests are willing to dedicate 1 hour of their time to spend with us, to talk with us about what they are passionate about, what they believe in, and how they see the world. And that makes me very humble. So I think every guest we've had has been just as important and as fantastic to me. And I hope that continues, if I'm very honest, going forwards.
Yeah. Again,
which is a cop-out, I suppose, right? Because I don't want to point at one specific person, but they all are, to me, heroes for having come on the show.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think everybody, all of the kind of guests are special in their own way.
Yes.
And it's kind of like choosing from your children, right? So, but then if you really kind of put a gun on your head, then you have to kind of pick one, and it's easy to pick the first one, right?
You're not a parent, Ville, so you know.
True.
I'm a father of 3 children, and I can tell you with my hand on my heart, we all have favorites, but your favorite changes. Right? So it's never always the constant of one favorite. The favorite child will change as time goes on, depending upon the phase of life they're in, etc. So you know.
So with that thought, maybe let's move to the next audience questions, and I have them in front of here as well.
Yeah.
Any recommendations to others who want to start podcasting? Well, we covered this a little bit already. It's basically just get out there and start doing it. Don't be afraid. If you're authentic, you will find your audience, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. A bit kind of obvious things to say, but for the people that I have talked to about podcasting, who also worry about the same things that we were worried about in the beginning, what kind of equipment do I need? Do I need a lot of software? Do I need to line up high kind of celebrity guests for my podcast? No, I think it's about kind of going out there and having interesting things to say, and you will find your audience. And you will not have a large audience in the beginning. Forget about that. And nor will you perhaps have millions ever. But I think it's mostly about, are you having fun yourself doing it? And I can definitely say that at least I have enjoyed a lot making these podcasts for the audience that we have, and I enjoy each and every one of you listening, of course. And it's been a privilege, and I hope to continue.
And to be honest with you, I think there's 2 extra points I'll add to that. One is, you always have something that's of value to someone else. You might not think to yourself that what you've got to share is going to be important, but it actually is, because there is always someone who knows less than you or shares your same philosophy and points on life, etc. I mean, I also do my morning coffee videos on LinkedIn, and I never really have people say to me, you know, these are great. But the minute I stop doing them, you know, like I've just had a break now for 2 weeks because I've been too busy. Then I start having people say, "No, love your videos. Are you gonna do more?" It's not whilst you're doing them that you realize that people are appreciating them. It's when you suddenly stop that you realize that people are appreciating them. So absolutely get out there and do it, and share the thoughts that you have, and just share your feelings, right?
Absolutely. And again, enjoy doing it. If it feels like a kind of a burden for you, it will also show in the things you're kind of producing, and then it's not going to be worth it anymore. Yeah. But as long as you enjoy it, keep on doing it. So what's the next question we have?
The next question was, how do you find your guests?
Oh, well, we partially covered that already. I mean, it's in the beginning, especially what you're doing is you're kind of going out with your own network and then kind of move out from there as you kind of get your feet wet a little bit in podcasting, and then you expand. But I think the kind of big moments for us when kind of finding these guests were that when we finally found the nerve to contact Brett King, for example, and being to request him to being a guest, and then suddenly him accepting, which was a big moment, of course, for us to start arranging those things. But yeah, it's basically using the network and again building the kind of, when you build the kind of guest lineup that you had before, it becomes easier to of course ask guests, saying that we've had these and these guests before, and they always kind of these people are fairly well connected as well in this kind of fintech circles. So if they see familiar names in the guests, they tend to accept easier in those cases. And then of course we do have guests who contact us directly, saying that they would like to come on the show, and we've had some great guests that way as well. And of course we want to encourage everybody listening as well to get in touch if you have some interesting things you feel like you could contribute to the show and our audience would actually like to hear. We're more than happy to have you as guests, so it works both ways.
And the other thing is, there's nothing wrong with reaching out to people to say, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? The worst they can do is say no. And there's no harm in that. I mean, we have actually had one or two guests that have said no, and maybe we'll ask again in the future and they'll say yes, but it doesn't actually, it's not negative. You just go, okay, fine, understand and move on, right?
Yeah. And then the kind of process of securing the guest is also interesting, because some of them have this kind of almost like qualifying questions. So they ask like, so what are we going to talk about? Who are you guys? And then you kind of want to give them the idea on what you want to do and how you're doing it. And then they will say yes or no based on that conversation. But then some people are like, yes, I'll come. And then they ask no questions and they just kind of appear into that. So what are we going to talk about? Let's go. So it's fun to see these kind of differences in the guests and the way they prepare to these recordings. But I think if you listen to the episodes, you wouldn't know which one is which because all of them ultimately feel quite comfortable in front of the microphone when we actually do the recording.
I actually think one of the things that we learnt moving on through the seasons is to reduce the amount of rigor and scripting, right? We started off in season 1 almost scripting our dialogues, etc. And now it's very fluid and open. Just a couple of bullet points on the structure of where the episode is going to go, and the rest comes as we talk. And I think that also adds a lot of freedom, but also honesty and flow to the discussion.
And mistakes.
and mistakes, yes. I mean, mistakes actually just shows that we are human.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. And you're right. I mean, especially when you start, you feel like you want to have a kind of structure, very kind of, you always fall back to the text that you want to say in order so you don't really miss anything. But then what you are actually then as a side effect, what happens is that it feels a little bit clumsy at sometimes. So yeah, I think we're going to continue working on that as well for the next season, which brings us to the next topic that I'm seeing in my bullet list here, which is season 4. And what are we looking forward to in season 4? We already mentioned a couple of things we're going to bring in. But I think, well, first of all, I think what we're going to do is we're going to update the visuals a little bit. So
yes, new logo.
So Paul, you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, we've got a new logo, which means that I've got an awful lot of work to do during the summer break, because I need to update all of our digital channels, including the website, with our new logo that we've got. Obviously, with the new logo, we'll have a new look and feel. So, the intros and the outros on our YouTube videos, the branding and look and feel of our YouTube channel and Twitter, etc., will change. But I'm quite excited about that. And I think, Ville, just to keep you really happy, we're going to look at maybe doing some merchandising now that we've got the logo as well, right?
Indeed. We have to get Fintech Daydreamer t-shirts, I guess, for us at least when we record. And again, who knows? Maybe even our listeners would be interested in purchasing some. So let's see. Yeah. Let's see if we make that happen. It's always nice to have t-shirts. And because then you can kind of get some recognition, I guess, in some circles at least. Or at least you can bother your family about.
Can I have a baseball cap?
What on earth is that?
What, a baseball cap?
Well, yeah, baseball cap could be nice as well.
Yeah.
But I'm really looking forward to when we get back to going to conferences, for example, to have my own podcast T-shirt on me when going on stage, for example, for a panel discussion. So yeah, it's
actually talking of that, Ville. One of the things that I really want us to do more of is live episodes, right? I would love for our guests, I would love for our listeners to invite us to their conferences, to their corporate days. We'd love to, host the event, do a live episode, get Fintech Daydreaming involved in some of the corporate activities that are going on. I think that would be really cool. I'd love to do more of that.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a fun way to have interesting topics covered, at least based on the feedback that we have had from the couple of live events that we have done so far.
Yes.
We are being invited back, which is always a good sign. And based on the feedback from the actual events, it's been quite good.
Yeah.
So talking about the live episodes, I guess once we both have vaccines right now for the coronavirus. So I think what we're going to try to do is to have more face-to-face kind of recordings, at least as much as we can, depending on how the situation develops. But I think that's one of the things that we want to achieve as well.
Yes.
But talking about the topics, so there are a couple of broad trends that we're seeing in the market right now that we will continue to follow. And one of these things, of course, is the kind of ongoing narrative around virtual currencies, central bank digital currencies. To borrow the quote from one of Dave Birch's books, the currency Cold War, which is kind of is going to play out in terms of all this kind of unregulated or less regulated crypto assets, central bank digital currencies from different countries. So we will have probably some friction between nation states providing their own digital currencies, and seeing how that kind of will play out on a global kind of theater is going to be interesting. And then we have the private companies like Facebook coming up with their own versions of virtual currencies. And I think this, of course, is something that we want to continue to follow, and hopefully have some interesting guests to talk about those topics as well.
Absolutely, and one of the areas that I'm quite interested in and diving into is the whole growing scene around buy now, pay later, and how the regulators are starting to engage into that market, and the effect, again, actually back to my focus on financial literacy, right? That there is a clash between financial literacy, people understanding the impact of engaging in very simplistic buy now, pay later offerings, because they're so easy to get involved in, right? To buy stuff, pay later, agree to that, but not understanding the lack of consumer protection, not understanding the impact if you fail on making payments, and also the growing number of use cases around buy now, pay later. It's an explosive scene. I think we need to spend some more time looking at that.
Yeah, or some people say buy now, pay forever.
That's true. Yeah,
depending on how it's structured, but definitely an interesting topic to cover from a consumer protection standpoint, of course, as well. But as the title of the episode, I believe, is going to be time flies when you're having fun, and it indeed does. We are coming to a close of this episode, which was fun to discuss about the way this kind of season played out and what we're going to do for the next season. But we wouldn't, of course, leave you, dear listeners, without doing one more segment of same but different to end this season. Now, the story I got for this one is actually based on the fact that the crypto market has been going crazy lately during this year, as it tends to go up and down, and the cycles are becoming faster. We just saw a dip and a recovery happening just in the last 24 hours. But the topic that I was picking here is actually something interesting that I've been following ever since I kind of got into crypto, which is connecting existing payment infrastructure into crypto assets and crypto debit cards. There was an interesting story on Forbes by Ron Shevling. By the way, that's an interesting guest that we should probably try to get as well.
Absolutely.
On season 4, was talking about how do crypto debit cards work? So the idea, of course, being that you get a Visa card or a MasterCard that is connected to your crypto assets, and then there's a conversion happening automatically to fiat currency, and then when you pay at the merchant will get regular fiat currency, but your crypto balance will be deducted, of course, adding all the kind of fees that go with it. Now, in my mind, the original intent of these types of products was basically to avoid capital gains tax for your crypto asset gains. But yeah, I think while that might still be the use case, I think that's becoming less and less possible to be done, because the taxman actually has figured this out, and they are kind of following this kind of debit card usages as well. But
yeah, I mean, the minute you've got a debit card that's connected to your crypto assets, you've got full traceability, right?
Yeah, you do.
So the taxman will see that and get to that instantly.
Exactly. And I think now that we're seeing more and more, of course, the local supervisors and regulators being more interested in these crypto exchanges that actually offer these products, they are demanding reporting from them. So, for instance, some of the largest exchanges are already providing this kind of information statements to the tax authorities, and they will automatically add this to your tax statement. Now, in the US, of course, where things are not as automated, especially on the tax front, people end up doing a lot of complicated processing in terms of trying to figure out how much tax should they pay for each debit card purchase that they have done from their crypto assets. And on top of that, it's also not that kind of economically viable, if you will, because there's a lot of fees that you actually have to pay. So there's the exchange fee, there's going to be the margins that the exchanges put on the crypto assets when you do these kind of transactions. And then ultimately, you also have to kind of figure out who will pay the interchange fee for actually using the debit card. And there's also all sorts of service fees on top of it. So yeah, for day-to-day usage, I wouldn't use it for sure. I guess what Ron Shevlin says as well, that you would be crazy to use these types of products. But there are, of course, people who have a lot of money in crypto, and for them, they have perhaps already made such big profits that they were still interested in using these types of things. But for the day-to-day usage, I don't really see it.
I don't get it. I honestly, I don't get it. I mean, like you said, yes, maybe if you've got a large amounts of Bitcoin and it almost becomes a toy, right? It's fine if you've got crypto and you want to pay with crypto, who am I to say you shouldn't? But number one, I still see crypto Bitcoins as being an asset for investment rather than the substitute of currency to buy milk, right? The next thing that I sort of see in my head, you can almost imagine going to the supermarket and trying to work out, well, if I'm going to buy 3 liters of milk, what is that going to be in Bitcoin? Well, with the fluctuation of the value of Bitcoin going up and down so fast, the time between you deciding that you're going to pick up the milk and paying for the milk, the exchange rate has changed so many times. You have no idea whether you're actually going to do better paying for your milk with Bitcoin rather than paying for it with your normal fiat currency. I don't get it, right? I don't get it at all. But maybe if you're buying a Tesla, right? Going back to the whole fun with Elon Musk and Tesla and Bitcoin and everything else, large purchases like that, maybe, yes, it does make sense in some ways. But do you need a debit card for that? Nah. So exactly. I'll go on public record and say, I don't get it. Makes no sense to me.
Fair enough. That's a good way to kind of end this discussion. And by the way, a fun kind of actually unverified fact, but as far as I have understood, there was one single Tesla car sold with Bitcoin while it was being accepted by Tesla. Of course, it's no longer accepted by Tesla, so there will not be more. But as far as I've heard, and again, this is unverified, they only sold one. So not a kind of a big success. So I guess people who are holding Bitcoin see it the same way as you do. And this reminds me, we absolutely have to talk about the El Salvador situation in the upcoming season, because maybe by season 4, when we start, the El Salvador situation where they made Bitcoin legal tender, we might have even more details about how it actually is going to be done and whether it worked out or not. It's definitely an interesting topic.
And I've actually got a direct question on that one. If El Salvador makes Bitcoin legal tender, does that mean that Bitcoin becomes part of the foreign exchange network, which means that I could sit here in Finland and do a foreign exchange from my euros to Bitcoin in El Salvador?
If there are exchanges that do that, yes. I mean,
shouldn't then the exchange in El Salvador theoretically do that as a foreign currency?
Yes, I guess they should, and I guess that's what they want to do as well. That's why they're kind of setting up these dollar reserves for merchants and so forth and so forth. And this, of course, raises some concerns about money laundering and things like this. But we digress. We have to leave this topic for season 4. I'm definitely looking forward to continuing that discussion, and hopefully, maybe we will find some people kind of closer to the El Salvador situation as a guest to talk about the specifics of that particular implementation. So that's a bar that we set pretty high for the next season. So. That's it, people. Again, thanks for being with us for this episode. Now, Paul, I guess usually we say that we will see you in 2 weeks, but what do you say? When should we try to start season 4?
I would say August, but I think you're sneaking away on vacation in August, but August.
August, let's put it there. I will be on vacation in August, but since this is so much fun, I might actually be willing to do an episode while I'm still on vacation.
I'd love to have an episode with you sitting by the pool somewhere. That would be really cool, right?
That would be a nice start for season 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Next to a pool, maybe with a drink in my hand. That would be, of course, a big way to kick off season 4.
Yeah.
So again, that's it. Listeners, thank you for being with us for this special episode where it was just me and Paul chatting about random things, but I hope you found it interesting. At least we gave you a list of interesting guests and episodes that you can go back to and listen to maybe hear all the mistakes, all the kind of things that our guests have been saying. They are kind of referring back from this kind of summary episode of season 3, pun intended. Again, thank you for being with us. You can reach us from the usual channels. So all the socials are anchor.fm page, or you can email us at hello@fintechdaydreaming.com. And do remember to leave us a review on any of the podcast platforms if you liked what you heard. The reviews actually help us a lot because it's easier for people to find this episode or this podcast, especially if you're interested in fintech like we are. So with that being said, thank you for this season, dear listeners, and we're looking forward to seeing you back again in season 4. This has been Fintech Daydreaming.